Hey guys, welcome to Spiritual Sunday. Today's video is going to be a great one. Now, if you haven't seen our last couple weeks, we've done a series on the Yoga Sutras on how to keep a peaceful mind. Just go ahead and check those out after today's video. Go ahead and put the link up here. What are we talking about today? Well, you clicked on it, so you should know, but who is the Buddha? So I'm creating this so we have an understanding of who the Buddha is, so when we get into Buddhism, you kind of understand a little bit of it and where it comes from. Okay, so the first thing that we need to discuss, this guy, he's the fat Buddha. He's not the real Buddha, he's the fat Buddha, as at least referred to in the West. He's actually a Buddhai. Point being is he's a monk from 900 AD, not the dude we're going to be talking about. Now the dude that everybody knows as the Buddha, when you see him, he's not the Buddha, he's the fat Buddha. Okay, makes sense, everybody good with that? Now we're going to move on. Second thing, this topic in general is very complex, has a lot of nuances in it, whether like that means just Buddhism in general or just about the Buddha. So we're gonna make this super simple for everybody. I don't want to get into all those details because it's gonna bog you down. This video is not about that. It is to create like a springboard for you to go ahead and get into Buddhism, have a basic understanding of who the Buddha was, what he did, how he came to his enlightenment, and just get a little bit of a general backstory on the Buddha, okay? Think about it as like Sunday school, right? It's not really like a good breakdown of what happened, but it's a general idea of what happened. And with that simplification, it might come off as disrespectful, so sorry, but again, this is supposed to be basic. And with that, some details are going to be lost. Now, let's get to the point, right? Who is the Buddha? So let's set the scene. It's 500 BC, right? Like 2,500 years ago. And there's this king, and this king has this mage come to him, and the mage is like, hey, your son, he's either going to be the greatest ruler of India, or he's going to be one of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time. And the king is like, well, shit, this is pretty great. I want him to be the greatest king of India, right? Like, of course I do, because I'm a king. Let my son become the greatest king. And so what he does is he says, hey, I'm not going to let this guy see any suffering. He's going to just live a splendid, pleasant life. He's just going to chill at the palace. Like, he's going to have a great life, and we're going to turn him into a great king. So Siddhartha, which is the Buddha's first name, right? He goes ahead and he gets raised in this palace. So while he's getting raised, right, he's having a great freaking life. Like games, food, whatever he wants, right? Bitches, all that shit's there. He's making fat stacks of fun, right? He just, all of his servants, all young, vibrant, good stuff going. Again, his friends, he's got games, he's got musicians coming into town. He's having a blast in this beautiful palace. He's loving life. Nothing bad has happened to him. Like, he's just having the greatest life that you could ever wish upon someone. Eventually, he gets married, he has a kid, and one day he's sitting there and he's like, yo, this shit's banging. I bet the whole town is banging. Let's get out there and see the town, right? So he goes ahead and gathers some friends, maybe. He goes ahead and is like, yo, chariot driver, let's get going. So he hops in the chariot. His chariot starts going down the road, and he sees an old man. First time he's ever seen an old man. He's like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? Like, imagine you never saw an old person in your life, and now you're just looking at this wrinkly old bitch, got white hair and everything, and you're like, what is that, dude? And the chariot driver's like, oh, so that's an old person, dude. How do you not know this? And he's like, what do you mean, an old person? He's like, well, remember when you were like a kid, and now you're a little older? If you keep living life, you're gonna turn into that. He's like, everybody? He's like, everybody's gonna turn into that. And he's like, okay, can you keep moving on? Like, let's get away from this guy, right? So they're going down the road, and he sees this guy on the ground, and he's like, whoa, stop, yo. What is this? What is this? This guy on the ground, he's like, starts throwing up. He's sick. He's aching. He's yelling out. He's like, ah. That's my sick. Ah. And he's like, what is that? And Chariot's like, yo, this man's just sick right now. Like, everybody gets sick from time to time. And he's like, I've never been sick. I've never seen anybody sick. Like, that's gross. Like, can you imagine never seeing someone throw up and this guy's just gagging all over the place? Like, you'd be freaking out. Again, this man's an adult now. Like, he's freaking out. He's like, can we keep moving down the road, dude? And he's like, yeah, I got you. So he starts going down the road, and they come across a funeral parade. And he's like, oh, what is this all about? And he's like, well, a guy died, so they're having this parade to come and bury him. And he's like, died? What is that word? And he's like, he's no longer alive, like he's gone. And he's having a hard time just even understanding this. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, everybody dies, whether it's from war, you get too old, you just die. Like, everybody dies. You're born and then you die. Like, it's just the circle of life, my dude. Have you not seen The Lion King? And he's like, nah, bitch, I never seen that shit. I don't got a VHS player. He's like, well, I'll tell you, it's pretty damn good. There's Mustafa, and then there's the fucking pig dude. I don't know the guy's name. I forget it. It's a long time ago that I watched it. I've been working at this palace, and again, as you said, we don't have a VHS player. So, like, I shouldn't even asked you about Lion King. Point is, he's like, what the fuck? People die? And he's like, get us back to the crib as soon as possible. This town is fucking shit. Like, what is this shit going on? I've never experienced pain. I've never had a paper cut. Like, get the fuck out of here. We gotta go back to the crib. So as they're returning back to the crib, right, they see this monk. He's under a tree. He's like in the lotus position. He's meditating, and he's like, whoa, stop real quick. This one's not so bad. What's happening here? And he's like, oh, that guy, he's a monk. He's just doing monk things. He's meditating. He's trying to get enlightened. He's trying to understand suffering. He's trying to understand everything, right? He's just sitting down there and he's just chilling. He's trying to get a little smarter, right? He's like, dang, all right, that's not so bad, but like, we gotta get out of here. This stuff is still creeping me out. So he goes back home. He starts having like a whole entire crisis, right? And he's like, what the fuck? And then he's like, yo, mama, hey baby, I'm gonna go get some cigarettes. I'll be back, okay? And again, the difference between your dad and the Buddha is that when he left his wife and his kid at a palace, not just like a trailer park. So just like keep that in mind. That yeah, he left his family, but like not the worst situation. So Siddhartha picks up everything. He just has a robe. He's walking through the streets, and he turns into like a nomad for a few years. He's going to some yogi schools. He's going through town. He's talking to people. He's not really eating. He's just walking a lot. He starts getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. Again, he's not eating because he wants to know what life is all about. So he has all the pleasant things. Now he's trying to like suffer and be like, okay, is suffering the way to go? Like, I'm confused here because everybody else suffers. I didn't suffer, but like maybe this is what life's about. So he's again exploring. He does this for years, right? He gets to be like kind of like a bag of skin and bones. Like, it's just kind of gross. Like, that's when you see this Buddha right here. Like, he's pretty unhealthy looking, skeletal looking dude. Yeah, that's because he's been wandering the country for years trying to find enlightenment, right? And so one day he comes across this river just on his path, and he's like, all right, let me go across this river. It's more like a creek, right? The water only comes up to like his knees, and so he's just trying to walk through the creek, and he gets stuck because again, the man's weak. He's like a little skinny dude, and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm stuck. He grabs onto a dead branch and he sits there. Nobody knows for how long. Maybe it's only 2 minutes, maybe it's a couple hours, maybe it's a couple days. Nobody knows, but he's standing in this water. He's freaking out because again, he can't move, and he's like, damn, I'm fucking dumb. I walked from here to there, and what have I gotten out of this? And he's like, you know, true thought, true understanding has to come from within. Why have I been searching this whole time? It has to come from within. So again, after a couple minutes, after a couple days, whatever the time is, he musters up his strength and he gets through the creek, and he sees this tree, and he goes and sits under this tree, right? And he goes ahead and starts meditating under this tree, probably because he was exhausted and tired, but he's right there next to the river, right? Under this tree. He's not eating anything at this point. He like maybe a few seeds fall into his lap from the tree, and he might eat some of that, but he's not eating anything, and this goes on for a long time. Chilling under this tree, he's trying to get enlightened, and he makes a pact that he's not leaving. He's not leaving until he understands what the heck is going on in this life. If you get into the mysticism side of things, like some demons come, try to like get him to leave and make sure he doesn't become enlightened, right? But he's like pushing everybody away. He's like, no, I'm staying here, and he chills for a while. And one day it just springs on him, just out of nowhere. Again, if you've ever had a great thought, it just kind of comes, right? It just comes out of nowhere. And he's sitting there and he's like, whew. He opens up his eyes and he's like, I understand. He looks up at the moon. He's like, I got this, yo. I got this. And that moment is when he became the Buddha, or the enlightened one, or the awakened one, right? That's not his name, that's a title. And again, with all the complexities of Buddhism, there's a couple other Buddhas, but we don't need to get in there. This is the Buddha story, right? So he becomes enlightened now. And he comes out with the 4 noble truths at this point. He goes and starts spreading this shit around. So the first noble truth is life is suffering and life has suffering. And that means suffering from dropping a chip on the ground to losing a loved one, to losing all your family in a terrible accident. Maybe someone kidnapped him, somebody chopped him up in little pieces, whatever, right? Life has suffering. First noble truth. Second noble truth is suffering comes from desire. And again, think about it this way, right? You desire that chip on the ground, you wanted to eat it, now it's on the ground, now you sad a little bit. So like again, life comes, or suffering comes from desire. And then the third noble truth is, well, if you get rid of desire, then you get rid of suffering, right? Like that makes sense. Like life is suffering, suffering comes from desire, get rid of the desire, now we don't got any suffering. Pretty simple. And then the fourth noble truth, again, there's 4. The fourth one is, here's an 8-step plan on how to get rid of desire, okay? Like that's what then creates Buddhism, right? Like it's this 8-step plan on how to get rid of desire, how to get rid of suffering, and how to just live a better life. Now, Buddhism gets into a lot more details. There's gods, there's worlds, there's dimensions, there's reincarnation, there's a bunch of stuff. But this is now you have an understanding, the basic understanding of what and who the Buddha is, why he became the Buddha, and the start of a whole new religion. So go ahead and take this understanding. Now when someone talks about the Buddha, you kind of have a basic understanding. Now you can go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of Buddhism if you want to, kind of see what that's all about. It kind of seems interesting on how to get rid of suffering. If you're feeling terrible, you're feeling bad, like what's the dealio on how to get rid of it? Well, maybe you want to become a Buddhist. But thank you for watching. I love you guys. I hope this was entertaining. I hope it helped you understand what the Buddha was and who he was. And biggest thing here, right, is nobody had any texts of the Buddha for hundreds of years. So all these little baby details, sure, they may be wrong, they may be right, but nobody knows for sure because it was hundreds of years of just oral passing down of these stories until they were actually written down. So things could have changed, little nitty-gritty details could have been misleading and maybe put up there to make him more special than what he was. Maybe he wasn't a prince. I don't really know all the details, right? Point being is this is the main story of how he became enlightened. So now you know. I love you guys. Go out there and spread some love, some hope, some peace, and I hope you have a great day. 16 minutes!